Greetings adventurers, this is Craddock and today we'll be going over a pseudo speed build for the Tal Meteor setup in hardcore. I say pseudo speed because this build is not going to be really below 5-minute clears. Typically you'll be more in the 6 to 8 minute range as far as clear speed, hence not a full-on speed build, but you can push a higher greater rift with the Tal Meteor setup, which is very, very cool. Core build here is going to be coming from Bloodshed's push setup, so I've basically taken his build and adapted it to my liking. If you haven't checked out his push build for Tal Meteor, please do. His link will be in the description below. So basically what we've got here is Tal Meteor setup. If you haven't seen the Tal Meteor, I'll quickly go over some of the multipliers, gloss over them. We've got the Tal 6-piece giving us a huge multiplier when we are juggling our elements, of course, and get that 6-stack bonus. We've got the Grand Vizier in the cube giving us a huge multiplier and some cost reduction when we manually cast Meteor. We have the Death Wish when we're channeling, more damage. We have the Edge Sigil similarly giving us a multiplier, and the Mantle of Channeling as well giving us a multiplier. A large part of this build, however, the focus of the build is more tailored towards hardcore, being able to stay alive, making it easier for the player to manage the bonuses and not have to worry so much. So to that end, I've made several swaps. The first of which is I'm using Frost Nova in this build, Frozen Mist, to be able to proc the Tal Rasha stack, 6-piece stack, and we keep this on Numlock or Autocast. It'll cast about every 10 seconds or so with the cooldown from Paragon, which isn't enough uptime to keep up your Tal 4-piece bonus from that 25% of that element, but still a great choice for not having to worry about it during the Rift, right? So the other choice here would be go with Ray of Frost Cold Blood, but in my mind that pairs better with a push build. I've taken out Audacity and I'm no longer using the Trap Gem. Those two combined are very strong for a Tal Meteor setup. However, I felt in this case that going with a different passive and a different gem would be easier, specifically because of Storm Armor paired with the Halo of Carini. Halo of Carini can be very difficult to keep up at times, so I wanted to try and make it easier. To that end, standing away from enemies would make it easier, because there's more likelihood than that Storm Armor would hit enemies that are farther away. So instead of Trapped, I've gone with Zei's. It's still a great multiplier. In hardcore, even if you're up close, you still get a little bit of bonus, and you don't have to worry so much about necessarily being at range, though being at range will help you out, right? So the worst thing that could happen is you stay alive and you do less damage, right? So that's the idea. We've got a lot of other items in the build giving us damage reduction, helping us stay alive. The constant bonus here is going to be double unity. So you got unity on yourself, you have unity on your follower, and you have the enchanting favor. Your follower cannot die. These combined give you 50% damage reduction. Very nice, it's up all the time. The other bonus we're going to try and manage here is the Aquila Cuirass, and we're going to try and keep this bonus up as much as possible. As you can see though, it goes down fairly quickly when you start spending resource. So to that end, we've slotted a lot of resource regeneration and restoration and cost reduction measures. We have RCR on shoulder required. We're going to have the topaz in the helmet for this particular build, and this will allow us that extra little bit of leeway so that while we're moving through the rift, if we have to manually cast, we can do it without fear of our Aquila going down while we're in density, this sort of thing. The topaz is just the better choice for this specific setup. There are some alternates in which you can swap this gem out for an amethyst, but I'll go over that in a little bit. We're also using Arcane Power and Crit in combination with Arcane Torrent. Static Discharge has a high proc rate ability as compared to a lot of other wizard skills, so the APOC on Source will help us out quite a bit here, and then we are using Inspire on the follower for that little bit of extra arcane power regen. Now, some things here to note with the Aquila as well before I move on. The Aquila Cuirass is in particular helped out by the extra Paragon submission here. We have an extra 25 arcane power that we're getting from Paragon. Also try to get extra arcane power on your source. This will increase the pool and make it such that when you cast Manual Meteor, your Aquila Cuirass will go down less often because your pool is bigger. The 90%, the little 10% gap will be bigger, and therefore you will sustain your Aquila a lot easier. Again, keeping up those defensive bonuses is going to be key to survive in the Rift. To that end, we've slotted a lot of shielding in this setup. We have the Galvanizing Ward, giving us 60% of our life pool in shielding. This nearly doubled by just wearing the Ashnagar's Blood Bracer, increasing the potency of our shields, and mine isn't even that great of an Ashnagar's, and I still have over 1 million shield just from sitting in town here. So, and you can see as I channel and start to use abilities, my magic weapon deflection will increase this pool bonus up to about 1.5 million, should be easily attainable with this setup, right? So that's a huge part of the survivability with this build. Yeah, so as far as surviving, to supplement the shielding, you're going to want to make sure you have a lot of vitality on your gear. So you're going to want to make sure you have vitality on your weapon. You definitely want vitality on that second slot of the gloves. You're going to want vitality on the bracers, of course, and you're going to want those life percent rolls as well. So you want life percent on your belt and on your shoulder piece at a minimum, and then optional, you can put life percent on your chest piece, or you could sub either armor or life percent for something like elite damage reduction, which would help the belt out as well. It's optional. And then here we have an option. You could also put vitality on your helmet if you want, and that would save you from having to put Vite into Paragon, but in my opinion, having the Meteor percent roll, Meteor skill damage roll on the helmet and the boots would be best in this configuration. And then here I've opted for the vitality on the source as well. So I'd say between the source, the boots, and the helmet, just make sure you have 1 to 2 skill rolls between those 3 items, and then the other places, meaning either helmet or source, just put vitality in that extra slot that does not have. And yeah, so we have a lot of other items. We have the COE. You have to manage your COE rotation. As far as casting, you're going to want to try to channel and manually cast your meteor right before the fire phase, and then maybe during the middle of fire phase as well, if you have time to recast that. Just trying to be efficient. Again, I don't recommend manually casting meteor more than once every 3 seconds or so. You can run into situations where your channeling is not up, and so you're not gaining the multiplier for a lot of the meteor shower impacts, right? So that's something to consider. The exception to this would be if you get a speed pylon, sometimes you can double cast the meteor and still keep your Taeguk up because your attack speed is so great at that point. This is another reason we don't want to drop our channeling, especially when in density. Try and keep your Taeguk up. When you're engaged with elites, try and keep your Taeguk up. But when you're moving through the rift, it's okay. You can let the Taeguk drop, and that's 100% cool and fine. You don't have to worry about dropping Taeguk as you're moving through the rift. It's just when you're engaged, make sure you try and keep it up, right? So we have a lot of other cool items here. So we're running the Invigorating Gemstone. So saving us, you don't have to put secondary crowd control reduction rolls on your gear that you would typically put like on your necklace or your helmet or your rings, right? So you don't need that with the Invigorating Gemstone. Invigorating Gemstone giving us that immunity to crowd control impairing effects. It's amazing. You don't have to worry about Vortex, you don't have to worry about Frozen or Nightmare or Knockback or any of that. It's just very smooth. It allows you to DPS consistently and whenever and wherever you want. So for example, if a Frozen is coming up right on top of where that Oculus spawn, just came up, you can go in there, you know, you can stand in the Oculus, you can leverage that extra damage, whereas if you did not have this item, you might not be able to do that, right? So that being said, the Invigorating Gemstone is what I would think is the weakest gem in this setup, so if you happen to have maybe, I don't know, I would say 3 would be my preference, three crowd control, impairing reduction rolls on gear, you can probably swap this out for Bane of Powerful and be just fine. It's just a little bit more annoying because you will still be, you will no longer be immune to those effects, right? So we've got a lot of other cool things going on here. We're running with Illusionist, of course. A little bit of extra movement speed, helping us get through the rift. Resetting our teleport, very important. Unstable Anomaly for that second life. We're also running here the Paralysis passive. So the main reason I'm running this gem in the helmet, the Topaz, is so I can have this extra passive slot and not have to use this slot for resource. The cool thing about Paralysis here is it will allow us to stun enemies that we are attacking. Calamity is great for stunning enemies that are nearby you or nearby where you're trying to move, to kind of move through the crowd, so to speak, but it will not help you if you're at range and you want to stay at range, right, and attack enemies from that location. So the Paralysis is what's going to help us do that. It's going to pin those elites in place. They're going to be at range longer, which helps you leverage that increased Zei's bonus, and if an Oculus comes up at range, you're even you've got even more of a benefit there, you know, right? So the high proc rate on Arcane Torrent should help out with keeping enemies at bay. And if need be, I found this build is kind of a little more vulnerable to being surrounded by melee monsters. If your Karini happens to go down and you are surrounded and being attacked by melee monsters, they will chew right through your shield. So having the Paralysis here in this particular build set up for hardcore is very nice, because if something like that were to happen, you could just instantly swing your Arcane Torrent back out from range near your character and hopefully stun some of those melee monsters, preventing them from dealing damage to you at that point and allowing you to then teleport away, right? So a lot of benefits to having the Paralysis here. It does, I found, kind of slow down the build a little bit in certain circumstances, where certain configurations of enemies get hit with the Paralysis, but others do not, and they start dispersing, so to speak. But on the whole, I think for hardcore, this is a great, the overall best choice, in my opinion, to survive, right? There are some alternates, some very good alternates here, so let's take a look at a couple of those. You could run with the Amethyst in the helmet, and then run with the passive Astral Presence, increasing your arcane power, helping to keep your Aquila bonus again, and giving you that extra arcane power regeneration, filling the role that the Topaz is now, and giving you an extra lot of health pool, which, as you can see now, I've had to put some points into Paragon. With the Amethyst in the helmet, I don't need to do that at all, so there's a benefit there with going Astral Presence. There are some other passives. You could go Power Hungry just for the extra damage bonus, Elemental Exposure, Unwavering Will. These are all really great choices. Dominance for the extra shielding, also a great option. I tried Blur, and while it does give you extra defensive capability, I found it really hard when I was running with Blur to proc my Illusionist consistently, which made it harder to move through the rift and ultimately felt just a little bit worse of a passive to choose. But so there are a lot of options for this optional slot, so keep that in mind when you're going about putting together this build. I do recommend having close to or near, 1 million health pool with this build. That's why I've put a little bit into Paragon, into Vitality, just to get a little bit of extra health and shielding through the extra Vitality, right? So, before I forget, fire percent on pieces here. You're going to want fire on Bracer, Amulet, or Crit, wherever possible. Helmets, gloves, rings. Cool thing here with the Unity is you get that extra elite damage. Cool thing with the Convention is you can put the average damage on it if you happen to get lucky with an Ancient, right? So a lot of cool things gear-wise going on here. You're going to want to look out for a secondary physical resist if possible, and single resists along with pickup radius is very useful as well. Just getting, I'd say, at least 6 extra pickup radius. 8 is even better, right? So keep a lookout for those sort of secondary roles. Anyway, I think that's it for the build. I hope you enjoyed this brief overview, and yeah, I'll catch you in the rifts.